Today we're going to go over the top 10 best commanders to smash with in the open field. Whether you like infantry, archers, or cavalry, I've got some recommendations for you, so let's get going. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And recently I made a 60-second video talking about the 5 very best open field commanders, and people liked it so much and they asked for more information, more detailed guidance on why I was making these choices. So here we are in a longer form video explaining what I think are the top 10 best commanders in the open field. Now, there's a number of things that you want to look for when we talk about an open field commander. And by the way, it's not a coincidence, Nevsky's on the screen. He's got a lot of these things. For an open field commander that trades well, you're looking for area of effect damage. Now, Nevsky doesn't have that, but you also want lots of march speed, ideally lots of health. You also want lots of debuffs, things that make the enemy less powerful, especially if that's in the form of a defense or health reduction, but march speed's pretty good too. You ideally want things that give you buffs, not only to your march, but also to other marches nearby. And the cherry on top for all of this is maybe even a little bit of sustain. Healing or skill damage taken reduction or counterattack damage taken reduction. I know those aren't exactly sustained, but things that make you able to stay on the field for longer, especially if you aren't being focused, are really, really powerful. This is what we're looking for. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about a few commanders that didn't make my top 10 list. And I have to say, people will probably look at my top 10 list and maybe rearrange a few of the commanders, and that's absolutely okay. I'm going to rank them based on what I think. You can bump a few around if you want. Like everybody thinks kind of like Nevsky's just #1 for everything. I think that's a little bit of, I don't know, inflation of his value. Nevsky's my #1 overall commander in the game. But this list, as a reminder, is specifically to open field. So let me talk about 3 commanders that were really close to making this list, but aren't quite there. First up is Trajan. And man, he's really powerful. He's very tanky and is giving lots of rage and also skill damage dealt to many marches nearby. He doesn't quite make my list because once you are in a situation where your other marches are dying off or you don't have allies nearby, his buff is actually not all that amazing. You need to actually have lots of other people nearby to really benefit from this. But when you're running 6 or 7 marches, I feel like it'd be a mistake to not be looking at Trajan purely for open fielding. In addition, I really wish I could include this archer in the list, and it's Nebu. And I don't quite think he's in the top 10, but he was very close to being in the top 10. And even though Nebu has march speed and defense, somehow he feels really squishy. Like every time I run out a Nebu march, I mean, you should focus Nebu if you see him. He's almost always somehow very squishy compared to other things that might be in the field. But his AoE is so good. And he does a rage reduction, which is pretty good, boosts your damage. The final commander that almost made the list, and maybe he should be on there. Like he's so good that maybe you would bump out someone who's like #9 or #10 on my top list here, is actually going to be a very popular early game commander. And that's actually Alexander the Great. Some people may think, whoa, Chisgule, you're crazy. I think when Alexander the Great gets a museum buff, he probably goes back into the top 10 list. Easy choice. But until he gets that buff, I always find that when I put Alex in a march, that march is very squishy. The exception is if you try to run like Skippy with Alex, that's going to work really well. I think Sargon coming out could be really good with Alex. So maybe he will get bumped up, but I put him just outside this top 10 list. And I love his instant proc damage. I love his march speed. Instant proc damage is something I should have mentioned earlier as being like just really valuable for the open field. I think his shielding is really awesome. Love that he's doing that. And most importantly, right over here, making other targets take more damage is really cool. You have to hope that that lands on all things that you're hitting. But even if it doesn't, it's so powerful for the open field. Very good effects here. And you could argue, I'm not going to say you couldn't argue. You could argue that he belongs in the top 10. So let's jump right into my top 10. And number 10 on my list, it's going to be the guy with the freaking moose horns, if I could find him on my list here, the outrageously long active skill to cast, Honda Tadakatsu. And the reason that Honda Tadakatsu is on this list is that he's got March speed reduction, and he's honestly just so versatile. I mean, there are so many commanders that you can pair Honda Tadakatsu with. I think if you were to swap any one commander out, it might be Honda for Alexander the Great, and I would honestly be okay with that. Now, Honda is again in this list for how versatile he is. He has to be the secondary commander. His active skill damage will be pretty low, but the rest of his kit is so strong, and as your March starts to get weaker and weaker, you're going to be doing more and more skill damage. So you got to pair with someone who does a lot of skill damage. Also, the extra troop capacity is really great for that, and he mitigates some damage at the start of an encounter, which just works so well for the open field. By the time those 57 hits have wore off over here in the expertise, you should probably be running home anyways. Now, do I think you should invest in Honda right now? I don't know. There's a lot of other commanders higher up on this list that I think are really good, and although Honda is really versatile, I put him just below number 9 on the list, which for me was Isong. And you may be thinking, wow, Isong is only number 9 on the list? And it is true that his area of effect damage is amazing. His museum buff's very good. However, he does only have 3 skills relevant for the open field here, and a lot of these other commanders are all relevant skills in the open field, and they're really good. So Isong's days will be numbered, but we're not there yet. Still top 10 in the list at number 9 is a great spot to be. In fact, a lot of people will argue that Boudica paired with Isong is the one archer march that you run if you're bringing only one. And for that reason, he's got to be in the list. I love Isong. I personally have swapped him out at times for Artemisia and for Cyrus. I really like the March speed. I also really like what Artemisia's doing. But Isong is on this list and not Artemisia because I think he's just such a snap include as being one of the very best marches. And I think if you look at what people were using in Ark of Osiris League, like the players who really need to have the best of the best, they were not really bringing Boudica Artemisia. They were bringing Boudica Isong, which I think tells a really important story here. And that brings us to number 8 on the list. Just above Isong and very popular is XY. Now, this is a commander that also only has 3 relevant skills for the open field, but the rage reduction and rage requirement cost on XY, he does both of those things. He's got the rage requirement cost lowered in red, you can see that here, and the rage reduction on the 4th skill is really good. He is very fun to use, by the way, in altar fights and ruins fights, because you fire off skills so fast, it's just so easy to get value. Smashing with XY, pair with Nevsky, and it's very, very strong. Now, you could also pair with William and Joan, and there's actually so many great cavalry commanders that XY can pair with. He is one of my favorite cavalry commanders. He is still on the list at number 8, which I suppose is a relatively low rank on the list, but again, some of these positions you could switch around. I also really like that he has a defense reduction. Unfortunately, part of the reason I almost didn't even mention it is that Nevsky has a better defense reduction. So his defense reduction is AoE, though. So a lot of things going well on XY. Big damage, big march speed, AoE. Love to see it. Rage reduction means it's just very simple to use. This brings me to number 7 on my list, and this is a bit of speculation. I think Sargon is going to be number 7 on the list for open field commanders. And I think you could make an argument that because of how his active skill works, maybe he doesn't belong on the list. The way that this works is you're going to buff yourself, and for the next 5 seconds, you're doing 500 damage factor. Well, 2,500 total damage factor is really good, but if your target moves away from you and you lose even just 1 second of that damage time, now it's only 2,000 damage factor. Or you lose 2 seconds, it's only 1,500 damage factor. So this is the reason that people are saying maybe Sargon is not even going to be all that good, but the other skills tell a very different story. He makes it so that targets take more skill damage, which is a big deal. It's a debuff, crucial if you're bringing many marches to the open field. He also has ridiculous amounts of stats. He's got a built-in mini Ring of Doom damage boost effect, which is really good. Oh, and by the way, as he's stacking up lots of these skill damage taken debuffs onto enemies, if they get to 10, boom, you pop them with damage factor and give yourself a shield, and you reduce the skill damage you take. I think he belongs on this list. I think he belongs at number 7, but it's possible. We'll see. I will be testing to see exactly how good he is, and maybe he doesn't belong on this list at all. By the way, if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so. I always make videos and do live streams when a new commander comes out, and Sargon will be no exception. I will have a live stream covering when he comes in game, and we'll figure out exactly how good he is. This brings us to number 6 on the list, and you almost could make the argument that William should be higher on this list because his 4th skill is insane. I mean, if you hit multiple targets with your AoE damage, you're going to give your troops rage and defense. That's just so powerful. William has all skills relevant in the open field. He's got instant proc damage that gets better when you're surrounding stuff. He's debuffing enemies. So much of what William is doing is actually amazing for the open field. The only thing holding him back is just how narrow his area of effect damage is, and that's really it. In fact, if he had like a cone AoE, or even better would be like a half circle AoE, oh my god, William might even be at the very top of this list. But because he doesn't have that, he is currently at number 6 on my list. And if you're going to run 2 cavalry marches, William is a snap include. And I think people are realizing more and more that this mini Trajan aspect of William is deceptively strong. Number 6 on the list, and he just made it to the daily special offer. I guess he's like 6 days out from that, 5 days out from that, from the time of this recording, but he is great in your roster, even at 5-5 or 5-5-5-1, just leaving that last skill unmaxed. This brings us to the top 5, the best of the best, and I've got to hand it to Guan Yu as just being so valuable for so long. It's kind of incredible, and it's all off the back of his AoE silence. Even though he's got a skill that's not even really relevant at all in the open field, and even though he doesn't have any defensive stats, which is crazy. I mean, this dude is pure glass cannon. He is so strong that he gets away with it. And I think that we're getting more and more tanky options to pair with. Skippy Prime is a great example. Leo has been an amazing partner for Guan Yu for a very, very long time. Leo doesn't make the list, Guan Yu does. And that's because Guan Yu is really responsible for the awesomeness here, and it's all about the 3-second silence. This effect is just too powerful. I mean, if gaining rage is good, making it so your enemy effectively is not gaining rage. They're just sitting there with a full rage bar, and not using their active skills. It's just too good. So he makes the top 5. Pair him with someone tanky, and you will get some really great results. Alternatively, you can pair with Alexander the Great, like many people have for a very long time. And because people are focusing on all these other commanders now, more and more, you can get away with that more and more and get some really good results. People are falling back on that Guan Alex combo, and it is serving them well. The oldie but goodie. And speaking of oldie but goodie, how about Boudica in her new Prime form? Boudica Prime, man. The reason she makes my number 4 on the list is specifically for this debuff. Making a target take 35% more skill damage is wicked. The march speed reduction is also pretty wicked. So you make them take more damage, and they can't get away. Seems really good. She's also really tanky. She also has some healing, and she can shrug off the silence from Guan Yu. And you pair her with Isong, which is one of the most important things. That's the best Isong pairing right now, is to go with Boudica Prime. So yeah, Boudica's number 4 on my list. I think she deserves it. She is enabling Isong at number 9 on my list. Great combo. Let's go to number 3. And I will say, a lot of people would shift around 1, 2, and 3 on my list. That's okay if your list is a little bit different than mine. I'll explain my logic and why I like them. The point is, they're all so high on this list, either way, that yes, they're all very good. Very, very good. And number 3 for me is Nevsky. And I know some people are going to be up in arms and say, but he's so good for rallying and, you know, so good for garrisoning and all these other things where it's like, why is Nevsky so good at all these things? But remember, we're just talking about open field in this list, okay? And for open field, if he did AoE damage, I would feel differently. And if he did a debuff that was different than defense reduction, I would feel differently. But his debuffs are great. 45% defense reduction, 2,300 damage factor onto one target. This is all so amazing. He's very tanky. I mean, 60% of stats over here, if you include march speed as like a stat. That's amazing. And he has procced health when you're getting hit, which is insane. He's boosting skill damage. I mean, he's like the new version of Isong, but better, and for cavalry. Like, there's everything good about that. I guess he doesn't do AoE damage, but he does benefit from stuff being surrounded. Awesome, man. Really, really solid commander. Again, the only thing holding him back in my eyes as being higher on this list is just AoE damage. If he had that, I'd be there, man. But let's talk about these commanders that are higher on the list that do have area of effect damage. And the first one that we've got to talk about is Joan Prime, who I have recently expertised. Joan Prime is insane. I mean, even on expertised, 5/115, and really, 5 and 4 other skill points on this commander. Anywhere they land here. And it's good enough to use. I was using it in Kingsland, unmaxed, and I have a lot of good options here. I replaced Saladin very, very quickly with Joan Prime. And a part of what's so great is the fact that she's doing AoE damage, and she does it not once, but twice. It's unbelievable, the power creep going on here. And the damage boost that you get and rage restoration. I mean, 60 rage on 3 total marches. That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. I would not underestimate how powerful these rage gain effects are at just dramatically increasing your damage. And the more of these rage gain effects we get, weirdly enough, even though there's a rage cap in this game, the more you're using active skills, the faster you do them, the better it is to have rage gain effects and things tied to active skills, all these debuffs and buffs and all this stuff. So these effects are getting better and better, not worse, even as we get more and more things that give us really, really fast rage cycles. So I think Sacred Banner on Joan of Arc and Joan of Arc overall clocks in at number 2 for my list. She isn't very tanky, although she does have some health, and she does boost your normal attack damage. So when you pair with Nevsky, I mean, the combo is insane. She's just very fun to use. She is very fun to use. But my number 1 commander in the open field is still Skippy Prime. And there's always a bunch of people who are like, but cavalry. And I'm like, well, hold on. Skippy Prime does AoE damage, okay? Number 1 here, AoE damage with a health reduction. You can't ask, I think, for a better debuff than that, okay? That's amazing. Health reduction. Plus, he's giving you 65% of stat bonus and joy when you're outside of your alliance territory. So that's 40% attack and 25% march speed. That's insane, man. And, okay, 20% health and instant proc damage over time, and you shield allies when you're taking skill damage, and he reduces your skill damage taken, okay, and he increases your skill damage dealt, and you gain rage faster when your target is silenced. I'm sorry, man, but Skippy is awesome, and he's enabling Guan Yu to just be astronomic. So whether you use Skippy with Guan, or you split Skippy, or you split off the Skippy to pair with Mehmed, or even Alexander the Great, or heck, you could use Harold. Like, Skippy's very, very powerful. I think 1 infantry march is the way right now, but with Sargon coming into the game, I think it's possible this opens up 2 infantry marches as being really great to use. We're just gonna have to see how good Sargon's kit really is. So Skippy clocks in at number 1 on my list, and for those of you that want talents on any of these commanders, of course, I've made videos dedicated to explaining that. You just look it up, Chisgule, the name of the commander, do a search on YouTube. You can find exactly that. And if you're wondering how to pair these commanders, I've got great news for you. I did a video about 3 weeks ago, before they announced Sargon, talking about how you can pair all these different commanders together for the open field. I'll have a card in the end screen right over here. And if you just want to see, hey, what was that 60-second version of this explanation, that'll be in the end screen as well. Check it out.